Isla stood there, mouth agape, as her mother casually dropped the bombshell that her birthday had been cancelled. It wasn't just any birthday, it was her 18th, a landmark moment that she'd been conjuring up in her mind since she was a kid. In the half-lit backyard, with decorations draping like confetti, she felt the warm Arizona breeze brush against her skin. It was supposed to be a night of frosted cakes and squeals of joy, but instead, she was left immobilized, extinguishing the unlit candles one by one. Silent but furious, something deep within her shifted. This wasn't surrender, it was just the beginning. To the casual observer, the family was the perfect postcard, a picture of stability with neat hedges and vacation memories plastered on the walls. But under that glossy exterior, it was like a reality show waiting to implode. Isla learned early that all that glitters wasn't gold, and maintaining the appearance of perfection came at an eye-watering cost. Often, she was the one footing that bill emotionally, trapped in a charming yet deceptive setup. Her older sister Miranda, the princess of the household, reigned supreme with her dramatic flair. If Miranda wasn't happy, heaven help the rest of them. She was a tornado of emotions, sensitive about everything: room colors, food choices, and door slams that could rattle the foundations. And there was Isla, ever the shadow, molded to accommodate her sister's whims. Just let her have it, Isla, echoed in her brain, a reminder to stay invisible and accept the role of silent caretaker. Isla wore the label of good sister like a badge, sharing clothes, dampening expectations, and fronting the idea that all families have their quirks. She believed in the patience will pay off mantra and played her role to perfection. But now, at 18, she wanted just a sliver of that spotlight. The night had been planned. She had baked cookies and adorned the backyard, feeling as if, for once, something might change in her favor. Little did she know, her desires would once again be eclipsed. When the clock struck 8 and reality set in, the backyard felt like a deserted theater in post-performance silence. The decorations that were meant to sparkle looked desolate, the lights buzzed like insects lost in space, and the entire atmosphere seemed to mourn the absence of celebration. Isla kept refreshing her phone, each unsuccessful ping amplifying her heart's desperation. Maybe someone was late. Maybe it was a mistake. Surely, the universe couldn't be this cruel. That night, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, it wasn't just darkness that enveloped her, it was the sobering realization that this family had no room for her moment. The untouched plates reflected her own deep-seated frustrations. Things weren't just unequal, they were profoundly unfair. Those feelings roiled within her, and the weight of their expectations felt almost unbearable. Something inside her whispered that she had to break free from this cycle, this perpetual game of hide-and-seek where she was always the one who had to hide. What was it that they saw in Miranda that warranted such devotion to her volatile moods? Isla questioned her worth in the eyes of her parents and felt like a literal ghost drifting through hollow celebrations. Only now did it start to dawn on her she'd allowed herself to fade into the background because it was the only role her family seemed willing to let her play. But would she forever remain content being a mere shadow? That night marked a turning point. Layla was done playing second fiddle. She was about to step into her own daring spotlight, come what may. The surrealness of the situation hung in the air, louder than the silence before a pop quiz. Cancelled. I parroted back, my voice punctuated with disbelief. My parents lounged on the couch, looking as if they were judging the world's greatest Netflix binge. My dear brother Daniel barely glanced up from the remote, and I could feel the collective shrug of indifference floating around the room. It was as if my 18th birthday was just a footnote in the saga of our family drama. Elise's sigh felt like the final nail in the coffin of my birthday hopes. You know how delicate Miranda is, she said, as all the world's sympathy for a 23-year-old child felt superhuman, leaving me, the birthday girl, to wallow in dissatisfaction. Suddenly, my disappointment bubbled up, a witch's brew of confusion and anger. I glanced over at Daniel, wondering if he had any semblance of sympathy left in his heart, but nope, he was too busy flipping channels through my shivering hopes. And just when I thought the universe couldn't possibly throw more curveballs my way, Miranda made her grand entrance, draped in a satin robe like some dramatic diva on a soap opera set, a scene straight out of a mother's worst nightmares. "What's with the yelling?" she quipped, and I felt like I was in a desperate sitcom where the punchlines never quite landed. It was hard to fathom that I stood here, in my own home, while she lounged luxuriously, utterly oblivious to my plight. In the whirlwind of emotions, clarity struck like lightning. "You cancelled my birthday for her tantrum," I spat, pointing at her with all the resolution I could muster. But oh, Miranda merely blinked, that smirk plastered across her face as if I'd just made a joke. "It's just basic empathy," she declared, and I nearly lost my mind. All those years where I'd been told to cater to her every whim while my emotions were brushed aside, it stung more than I cared to admit. "Done," I whispered, and the word resonated in the room like a secret hope. Just then, the doorbell rang, loud enough to jolt everyone from their dramatic roles. Faces turned pale, including Elise's, and Daniel, well, he finally muted the TV. When the door opened, my grandfather, Edward Stern, stood there like a northern wind crashing onto a summer day. He scanned the room, his wise eyes drinking in the tragedy before him. Hope fluttered in my chest for the first time that night. "What's going on here?" His voice sliced through the tension, leaving the room spellbound. We all stood frozen, and for the first time, I didn't hide the truth from him. "They cancelled my birthday because Miranda was upset." His brow furrowed, conveying emotions louder than any words ever could. As he stepped inside, the room seemed to contract, and my heart raced faster than I could control. "I told everyone I was sick," I admitted, glancing at their expressions as I said it. A wave of disbelief surged in me, and Edward's reaction was immediate. The once quiet power dynamics shifted, and it was as if he wore the crown of family justice. "You cancelled her 18th birthday for a tantrum," he repeated, directing all that authority straight at Miranda, who, to her credit, rolled her eyes but clearly felt the weight of his gaze. Overwhelmed, she shot back, her defenses rising, but Edward's calm, powerful presence demanded accountability. "You're 23, he said, delivering a diplomatic smackdown. "And she's 18. In that moment, the air crackled with electricity. I stood there, buoyed by the promise of resolution, feeling lighter as if the chains of this ridiculous family drama were finally loosening, making way for my long-overdue birthday bash to emerge like a phoenix from the ashy. The tension in the room was palpable as Edward turned his gaze toward my parents, delivering a judgment that hung like a cloud overhead. I could practically hear the ceiling fan whirring in disapproval. Daniel, desperate to defend our family's honor, finally faltered. "Edward, you don't understand how sensitive she gets." It was as if he were trying to deflect attention from the growing problem, something we all felt but were too afraid to name. Edward sighed, disappointment clear in his breath, and the gravity of the moment pressed down on us like a wet blanket. "I've supported this family for years," Edward stated, his voice steady yet fierce. "I believed I was helping raise two daughters with fairness and dignity. But he was seeing something entirely different tonight." My heart raced, especially when Elise looked genuinely taken aback. "You've supported Edward, please," she began, but he silenced her with a single hand. His transformation, flipping from authority to gentleness when he addressed me, was astonishing. "ILA, do you want to leave with me?" he asked, and my heart skipped. Never in my wildest dreams had I been offered a choice like that. "Yes," I replied, firm and unashamed. The moment I looked at Elise, I noticed the flicker of something behind her eyes. It wasn't just fear of losing me, it was the dread of what my departure hinted at for them. Edward nodded, "Go pack, sweetheart." And just like that, I climbed the stairs. For the first time in 18 years, I didn't glance back, powered by a surge of freedom that filled my lungs. I packed in record time, not because I feared interruption but because a heaviness in my chest began to lift. Each shirt folded, every book placed in my bag, felt like I was reclaiming pieces of a me that had gone missing. My room had always felt like a temporary holding cell, but with my suitcase in hand, I finally grasped why I never felt at home because I wasn't meant to be. Leaving felt like an exclamation point on a long sentence of being overlooked. As I stepped downstairs with my suitcase, the atmosphere thickened like dough. Elise stood by the kitchen island, a concoction of disbelief and indignation washing over her. Daniel stood awkwardly behind the couch, and Miranda, with her legs crossed on the stair, pretended to be absorbed in her nails. Edward waited for me at the door, as if that moment had been etched in time. "Ready?" he asked, and I nodded, though I felt the weight of a reluctant audience behind me. Suddenly, Elise stepped forward, the queen of denial. "ILA, sweetheart, don't be impulsive," she exclaimed. "Your sister didn't mean to hurt you. We can fix this. We'll plan another celebration." I couldn't help but sound off. "You cancelled the one I had, and you didn't even tell me," Daniel chimed in. "It was a misunderstanding." "No, it wasn't," I shot back, making it clear that my feelings were valid. Miranda, rolling her eyes, tossed out an eye roll that nearly knocked me off my feet. "Enough," Edward said, stepping closer. The room went somber, as if someone had pressed the mute button on chaos. His quiet authority redirected the energy that filled the room. "I'll say this once," he declared, addressing my parents. "You've treated ILA like an afterthought for years, and tonight proved it. I won't be part of this anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. The reality of his words sank in, and Daniel looked like he'd just seen a ghost. "Edward, no," Elise began, but he waved her off. With one fluid motion, he beckoned me outside, and I followed him into the moonlit night. The cool air enveloped me, brushing against my skin with a soft hush, like the world was nudging me toward a more promising horizon. The thrill of freedom pulsed through my veins as we stepped into a future that finally felt like it might belong to me. The morning after the uproar, my phone buzzed incessantly like a hyperactive bee. "Elise, please come home so we can talk. We didn't mean for things to get so emotional," my parents pleaded. Daniel chimed in too. "Your mom and I want to apologize. Miranda is very fragile right now." "Fragile?" Hilarious. Miranda herself later griped, "You're ruining the whole family over a party. Grow up, ILA." Because obviously, my existence revolved around her melodrama. I ignored the buzzing and focused on the calmness that enveloped me. Edward whipped up the finest breakfast eggs on toast and a bowl of fruit, complete with his signature off-aim chop that left him with a bandaged finger. "You're safe here," he reassured me, "for as long as you need." And just like that, I basked in a serene week that felt like a vacation after emotional chaos. No drama, no chaos, beauty in simplicity, with Caleb walking me home after school like my own charming protector. But just as I thought I had cracked the code to peace, my parents persisted with their relentless football match of guilt. "We miss you," they lamented. "We want to fix things. You belong home." And finally, a surprising twist: "If you want to return, tell us what you need." So I did. I typed up one serious message: "Miranda needs to move out permanently." Simple yet effective. It wasn't revenge, it was a clever gambit for clarity. Would they choose her over me? Let's find out. Daniel was quick on the keyboard with, "We can discuss it." But Elise, sweet Elise, chimed in, "We just want our family whole again." "Ah, dear Miranda." Crickets. 2 days of pure digital silence. I thought it was bliss until my uneventful stroll with Caleb led me to an unexpected shock. There was Miranda, leaning against a silver car like some kind of melodramatic villain. My stomach soured as she prepared to confront me. "We need to talk," she ordered. But I wasn't about to entertain her solo act. "Not without him," I firmly declared, tilting my head toward Caleb, who was undoubtedly ready to battle. Her response? A sneer. "I'm not talking to your guard dog." Well, that escalated quickly. My level of irritation shot up to a solid 10. "Then you're not talking to me." And just as we walked on, Miranda unleashed chaos, grabbing my wrist like it was some sort of trophy. Caleb, the ever-resilient shield, intervened like a knight in shining armor, effortlessly pulling her off me. "Walk away," he urged her, but did she listen? No, the drama queen opted to kick it up a notch. "You think you're better than me now, living with Grandpa," she spat. My calm rebuttal shocked even me. I was nothing in this family. But as I warned her about calling the cops if she touched me again, I could see her face morph into a mixture of disbelief and pure shock. Finally, someone had stood their ground. That night over dinner, I divulged the whole saga to Edward, the drama, the confrontation, his eyes igniting with worry. He was ready to dial the authorities, but I quickly halted him. "She got the message, it's enough." After a long, thoughtful pause, he smiled with pride. "I'm proud of you." And just 2 days later, a response from my parents confirmed everything I'd feared. "Miranda will continue living with us. You can't be trusted. You're manipulative and ungrateful." Ouch. But honestly, that just reinforced what I'd known all along. I blocked them, and oh, what a liberating experience that was. The silence that followed was like a refreshing breeze after a thunderstorm. Miranda, in her effort to post something about toxic siblings, really shot herself in the foot. It didn't take long for the truth to spill out, and suddenly our family's curated facade crumbled. Every aunt, cousin, and friendly holiday guest drifted away. Without me propping it up, their picture-perfect family image had a meltdown within 2 weeks. As the dust settled, I witnessed the slow-motion collapse of my parents' lives. Daniel's accounting office began losing clients like they were going out of style. Elise started distancing herself from friends, and Miranda, well, she found herself packing her bags to move out. Not by choice, mind you, but because the tension made it feel like our family home was shrinking. I stood back and watched, not fueling the fire but also not shedding a tear. My exit simply exposed the cracks that had been there long before I left. Meanwhile, life with Edward felt like a gentle hug. Mornings were filled with warm sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and the soft sound of Edward reading the newspaper. There were no slamming doors or hushed arguments. I could finally breathe without the weight of their moods. For the first time, my days were my own, and I dove into school applications for futures I never allowed myself to dare dream about before. The moment I received my acceptance letter from a university in northern Arizona, it felt monumental. Edward's hug was everything, like I'd handed him a ticket to a new life. "You earned this," he beamed, and I believed him. Caleb and I took a scenic drive to tour the campus that weekend, and every mile felt symbolic. With pine trees lining the open road, there was no urge to look back, no detours back into the chaos. Just me feeling lighter around someone who let me breathe freely. As the news trickled in about my parents, I observed from a distance. My relatives were still in touch with Edward, keeping me informed about Miranda moving boxes into a showbox apartment across town. Their meticulously crafted image had finally cracked beyond repair. Were they ruined? Not exactly. They were just unraveling quietly, like my exit had unwound years of tension they'd hidden. I didn't feel the need to gloat. No "I told you so" posts were coming from me because that wasn't the point at all. Sitting on Edward's back patio one evening, I gazed at the mountains glowing under sunset hues, and I felt a release within me. It was like a final string snapped, setting me free. Leaving hadn't crushed my spirit, it rebuilt me, stronger. I had discovered a simple truth: sometimes the most powerful decision is to walk away, and my parents mistook my silence for defeat. Little did they know, I had established a boundary they couldn't twist, and as I stepped out of their shadows, my life began to bloom into a beautiful, steady rhythm. If any of this resonates with you, please know you're not being overdramatic or ungrateful, you're not alone. Share your story too, because we all have moments that deserve to be heard, celebrated, and shared. There's strength in connection, and together, we can find that peace we seek.